Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to the NHS Health Talks show. I'm Gusharan Kaur, Sati Coordinator for Public Health, Sandwell. Today we have Joe Luxmore with us, who is the Tobacco Control Lead for Public Health, Sandwell, and we will be talking about the dangers of smoking. So Joe, we know smoking is the single most prevalent cause of death, and it kills about 80,000 people a year in UK. Deaths from smoking are also numerous than the next 6 most common causes of preventable deaths combined. So it is a big preventable factor that we can actually talk about and address and raise awareness of. Can you tell us why is tackling tobacco so important?
Certainly, and thank you for inviting me today. Tobacco for many years has been a significant problem because of the causes of death, the amount of deaths it causes, and the government are strongly supportive of this agenda and actually have a national strategy to address the different strands of tobacco control. And it's because it's still one of the biggest causes of preventable death in England, and there are interventions that we are using, such as legislation, such as the NHS Stop Smoking Services, to support people to make more informed decisions about their choice of using tobacco. So primarily we are here really to help inform people about the dangers of tobacco, but also help them make more informed decisions about their use of tobacco.
Definitely. Okay, thank you. I mean, in terms of, if we're talking about Sandwell now, we know 29% of people smoke, and there are actually 600 smoking-related deaths in Sandwell. Sandwell has a very diverse population. We know that from our experience of working in the area. It's estimated 22% of BME people live in Sandwell from BME backgrounds, compared to only 12% nationally. Does this have any kind of, does the smoking service see a reflection of this ethnicity makeup in the smoking services as well?
We do, yes, certainly. We do record and monitor, obviously, the diversity of people accessing the services. What tends to happen is, though, obviously, from people from different cultural backgrounds use tobacco in different ways.
They do.
And it's up to us, really, from a public health perspective, to really assess that usage and understand how we deliver services appropriately to cater for the needs of those populations. So from a Sandwell perspective at the moment, yes, we do look at how many people are accessing the services from different cultural backgrounds and ensure, obviously, that the services are appropriately delivered to accommodate those.
To that need, okay. What's the prevalence of smoking in the young population?
That at the moment, again, it's very difficult because you can imagine with young people, they start smoking for very different reasons at very different ages. But approximately 190,000 young people aged 11 to 15 are smoking or start to smoke each day. So it's a significant number. And again, it's quite a challenging area in terms of tobacco. What most local areas tend to do is deliver educational interventions. Again, to try and help children make more informed decisions and understand the significant dangers of tobacco. And from a young people's point of view, again, they can access the stop smoking services if they become addicted to nicotine, because very few people, I think, choose to smoke. It's the addictive nature of the drug really that hooks people in and then makes it a lot more difficult for them to overcome that addiction.
Well, my next question was actually around, is smoking addictive? Some people feel that they can actually, choose to smoke socially, maybe sometimes. If they have a circle of friends, on social outings, they can smoke. But actually, they feel that they have a choice. Actually, they don't want to smoke sometimes. Is that really true? Or is it actually definitely addictive?
Again, it depends on the circumstances. Many young people are very experimental and do try it, and obviously if that experiment then leads into further usage within that social circle, that's what tends to make people addicted to the drug.
Right, okay.
They tend to get hooked at a fairly early age, and then obviously it leads on into adulthood. So again, it depends. If some young people try it and don't like it at all, so it puts them off for life. And then some young people, obviously, it becomes part of their wider social circle, and it just becomes a habit then, an addiction.
So you might think actually you have a choice over it, but sometimes you actually might be already addicted to tobacco.
Absolutely.
Before you realise that actually, it's gone.
Exactly. That's what I've said. Very few people actually choose to smoke. It's the addictive nature of the drugs within it.
Yeah. Okay. So what actually is in a cigarette? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. Well, actually, there's about 4,000 chemicals in a cigarette, and most of them are cancer-causing.
Right, okay.
Chemicals, so it is very, very dangerous. And there's things like, you'd be very surprised, it's things like a nail varnish remover.
Really?
Some people aren't,
Wow.
Some people are very surprised at what's in it. So it's things that, if you were more aware of what was contained within a cigarette, you probably think twice about smoking it, actually, because you wouldn't think about drinking nail varnish remover. So again, that's why we try and educate young people at school to make them more aware of the harm than it does to their body over a long term and a short term.
And can second-hand smoke affect non-smokers as well? I know some people might make that conscious decision, not to actually engage in any kind of smoking or drugs or anything like that. But actually, how does second-hand smoke impact on non-smokers?
It's very significant, actually, and that's why the legislation was introduced in 2007, because the scientific evidence that was developed to inform the legislative process, actually, second-hand smoke does kill people.
Really?
One of the prime examples, you've probably heard of a person called Roy Castle, who was a very famous musician in England, and he'd never smoked a cigarette in his life, but a majority of his life was spent in pubs and clubs, playing his instruments, and he developed lung cancer, and it was a result of the smoking environment that he was subjected to through his work. So it's, again, the legislation came in to protect people from the harms of second-hand smoke. It wasn't really there to take away people's rights to smoke. It was allowing people who don't smoke to work in an environment of their choice.
So, I mean, obviously then there's actually, real case histories of people who have been impacted by second-hand smoke.
Yeah.
So I guess the message here is around, when people are engaging in smoking-related activity, to be mindful of actually maybe where you're doing it, isn't it? I mean, is there any evidence around, how does that impact in a family if, parents are smoking around children maybe?
Absolutely. That's one of the key objectives, really, of the government at the moment, is to look at smoking in the home, for example, and smoking in the cars. Some of you may be aware that there's a lot of lobbying going on at the moment for smoking in cars, for example, because the concentration of the cigarette smoke is far higher in a vehicle than it is in a public environment. So obviously it's put young people at risk. Similarly, in the home as well, around children, they are subjected, if they're regularly subjected to second-hand smoke, then it causes things like glue ear, asthma, which is quite significant.
Quite high numbers of asthma,
and obviously these conditions are very prevalent in young people who are subjected regularly to second-hand smoke exposure.
Right, okay.
So at the moment, most local areas are looking at initiatives to inform families of the dangers. You may have heard of the 7 Steps campaign, for example, that's being used in the northeast, where parents are being encouraged to walk at least 7 steps away from their back door or front door. So they're outside of the building, so the smoke doesn't filter back into the house. So a lot of areas at the moment are introducing schemes and initiatives like this to try and raise awareness and allow families and parents to make more informed decisions about their smoking.
Okay. So are there any policies in place? I mean, we have briefly mentioned, and talked about a few. Are there any specific policies in place to address the smoking issue in general?
Absolutely. As I've already alluded to, probably the biggest public health measure that came into force in 2007 was the smoke-free legislation, which prevents people in enclosed places to not smoke. Obviously, they can take it outside and smoke, that's fine. There are also other policies coming through at the moment. You probably have them in your own workplaces, for example, where you're not allowed to smoke at work, indoors, and other policies coming through at the moment are being reviewed around, obviously, smoking in the home. They're looking at those. Some tenancy agreements as well have. Do
they have a no smoking policy?
Yeah, because obviously you're aware that obviously it escalates costs around insurance because of the fire risks. Obviously the refurbishment costs. So some tenancy agreements now are looking into measures to prevent people from smoking. Although I appreciate, that is quite a debatable issue because obviously it's a person's home. So that does need further further discussion, I think.
So there are measures, being explored, if not already in place, of kind of growing trends of smoking-related issues.
Absolutely. The other one's probably to note as well, which you're probably already recognising, especially in the UK, is that the government are now introducing legislation within supermarkets and newsagents to actually hide the cigarettes behind a wall. They used to be called the power walls, which were all the cigarettes were on display. But there is supporting evidence now that actually this influences young people, because the tobacco industry are very clever at marketing their products and making them very appealing to young people, and enticing that younger audience into using their products. And as a result of that, obviously the evidence came through. The government made an informed decision to then introduce these walls to stop the display of those.
That's already in motion?
That's already in motion, yes. In newsagents, smaller premises by 2015, but you'll probably noticed in bigger supermarkets that's already in force. And obviously there was legislation that came in for young people buying tobacco. The age limit was raised to 18. So if we can now kind of move on to the effects and impact of smoking, what diseases are smokers at risk from? Because we do know that it's preventable cause of death and biggest preventable cause of death. So we know that smoking does actually is linked with a lot of long-term conditions. So if you can tell us about what diseases the smokers are primarily at risk from. Absolutely. I think probably the biggest one that everyone is most aware of is lung cancer, that smoking-related disease. It depends on the type of product that's used by the individual as well. For example, if you are if people are using smokeless tobacco, they tend to chew it or suck it or park it between their gums, so therefore it causes all types of oral cancers and problems orally. In terms of smoking, emphysema, COPD, they're very common diseases that eventually lead to death as well. They're very significant. High blood pressure, a lot of people don't realise, because what happens is obviously with smoking it accelerates the fatty deposits within your arteries, therefore it restricts the blood, so it creates higher blood pressure. So they're just a few, but the list is quite extensive, really. And obviously, those smoking-related diseases, unfortunately, people do usually end up in hospital as a result, and the associated costs with treating those people are tremendous.
They are. Can you tell us a bit more about, we've talked about the diseases smokers are at risk from, but what about in pregnancy-related impact on unborn babies?
Absolutely.
What do we know about that?
Again, this is where we're hoping to raise awareness, because a lot of women may not understand the full extent of the dangers. But just recently, probably a couple of years ago, the Royal College of Physicians published a book actually of evidence of the dangers to an unborn child. Things like reduced birth weight, and a lot of women think actually having a lighter child will be easier to conceive, but actually that in itself presents significant problems after they've given birth. There's reduced birth weight, it has fetal problems, malformations. So again, the list is very extensive. And again, there's a lot of evidence out now that supports it. So, we do try and work very closely with midwives to raise that issue, and allow women the opportunity to have a carbon monoxide check. So if their levels are high, not only for smoking, but obviously for dangers in the home, such as your heating, etc., that we can refer them appropriately into services if they wish to have support for them.
Thank you. Just to let our audiences know, we are taking live calls in this show as well. So ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ smoking related issue ਬਾਰੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕੁਝ ਪੁੱਛਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਆਪਣਾ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਸ਼ੇਅਰ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨੀ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਟੂਡੀਓ ਤੇ ਕਾਲ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ. So we're talking to Joe Luxmore, who is the Tobacco Control Lead for Public Health Sandwell. Thank you, Joe, for joining us again. So we also know that smoking has an impact on other diseases as well, which might not be directly related to or seen as, caused by smoking as a result of smoking. We know Asian population, for example, has a high prevalence of diabetes. What do we know about the impact of smoking on diabetes?
Well, the evidence now, there's a lot of evidence out there, suggests that it does affect your insulin levels.
Right, okay.
Which obviously is key to people suffering
Managing
from diabetes. Absolutely.
Yes.
So that's probably the most significant issue to note. If you are a diabetic and you smoke, that it can exacerbate the problem.
Right, okay.
So in terms of that, obviously, in terms of other things like blood pressure, if you're suffering from diabetes and a combination of other things as well, the smoking again will just
to escalate any existing condition you might have because of, I guess, your breathing pattern, isn't it?
Yes.
It's impacted by smoking.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we've talked about kind of, the impact of smoking and how addictive it can be unconsciously or subconsciously because of what's actually in the products. So what is the best way to quit smoking? If somebody feels that, okay, you know what, I want to quit now. I'm at that, I've prepared myself, I've made up my mind, I actually want to quit. What help is out there for people who are ready to quit?
We're very, very lucky actually in England because we have the support of the NHS stop smoking services that primarily help people to stop smoking who are using cigarettes.
Okay.
And essentially what happens is you can go into either a group setting or a one-to-one setting and you'll have your nicotine dependence assessed. So for example, they'll ask you how many cigarettes you smoke and then you will be you'll have a discussion to see if you're motivated to stop smoking at that stage, and then one of the advisors will tailor a programme according to your specific needs, give you some nicotine replacement therapy if appropriate to support you to stop, and you'll go through up to a 12-week programme to support you to come off nicotine addiction. And they'll obviously, your medication will be reduced over that time.
Right, okay.
So hopefully at the end
so you would have, I guess, regular,
appointments.
Consultations and appointments in that time.
But obviously the services are tailored according to need, and we're very lucky because we have like 10 years worth of evidence now about how the services operate and the most appropriate way to deliver. So most people just drop in when it's convenient for them. We have services Monday to Friday, usually up until about 9 o'clock in the evening on most days. So we're trying to obviously understand the audience and
tailor-made this service to meet the need, I guess, of the community. How much does it actually cost to access one of these stop smoking services?
To access the services, it's absolutely free, which is always a good sign. If you are eligible to pay for prescriptions, depending on the nicotine replacement that is, or the prescription-only drugs that you're prescribed, will obviously dictate your prescription charge. But essentially, all the behavioural support and your weekly appointments are absolutely free. It's just the medications themselves that if you are eligible to pay, you'll be responsible.
So is it right to understand that the smoking advisors are able to prescribe, or the medication is prescribed by another practitioner? Yeah,
the nicotine replacement products, which are the ones primarily that are first line, so they'll be offered to you first. All of the advisors are appropriately trained to be able to prescribe those to you. There are certain drugs which you may have heard of called Champix and Zyban, and they're prescription-only drugs, and you have to go to your local GP to have those particular drugs, yes.
Okay. So, I mean, in terms of, we've talked about locally in Sandwell what services support is available, but actually nationally similar services are set up as well. Where can a local person access services in Sandwell, for example?
We have tried to put them in every town in Sandwell, so hopefully there'll be one near to where people live. There is also a one number that you can use if you contact the local authority and ask for the lifestyle services one number. They will then signpost you appropriately into a service of your choice.
What's nearby?
Absolutely. So they'll firstly probably just ask you where you live, and then they'll signpost you onto a service as near as possible to where you live or work.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about smoking and smoking products. Now we've also been hearing about a term, niche tobacco. What do we actually mean by the term niche tobacco?
Niche tobacco are primarily the smokeless products, such as pan, cat.
Right, okay.
There's also included in niche now is Shisha or hookah, which is commonly known by. So they're all products really that, again, are emerging issues within localities, some of which are very culturally embedded, and we understand that they have a very social significance in certain cultures. But what we're trying to understand is how we better manage the regulation of these products, because some of them within localities are regulated and do go through the right channels, but what we're finding more and more through our work with revenue customs and trading standards is actually a lot of these products aren't regulated. It's very important for people to understand that when they're buying a product, there should be health warnings on the products, very similar to what you'd find on cigarettes. And on most products there isn't. So we're trying to again raise awareness of that issue. We work very closely with retailers about those particular issues, and again what we're trying to do locally is understand from local people how prevalent these issues are, you know, how often the products are used, by how many people, and then try and understand the most appropriate interventions to help people overcome their habits really.
Okay, thank you. There is a significant increase in the usage of shisha now by young people. We're hearing more and more about shisha these days. What's the, I understand historically it was mostly used in the Arabian countries. Now we are seeing that because we mix so well, in the communities are working and living so closely with each other, we're actually seeing the trends where these products are actually now being, you know, the prevalence is increasing in all communities alike really, isn't it? What is the trend locally in terms of the shisha usage?
Again, that's something we are gathering intelligence on, but we are receiving more applications for shisha bars to deliver within our locality. But again, what we're trying to do is ensure that local people are informed about their choice to use shisha. A lot of people, there's a lot of myth around it because it's filtered through water. Many people believe that actually it filters out all the harmful products from the tobacco, when actually the evidence suggests now if you're with friends and you have an hour's session on a shisha pipe, it's the equivalent of smoking up to 100 cigarettes.
Really?
So the harms are very, very significant. Also, again, people don't realise passing the pipe round, it's a health protection issue. You're passing it round and you have a higher risk of communicable diseases. I struggle with that one, sorry. And things like hepatitis, tuberculosis.
It's not really sanitized then.
Exactly.
Anyway, is it?
No. And again, you know, people are very surprised when you know when they hear about the dangers of shisha and the health protection issues.
Right. Okay.
So again, you know, this is our role really, just help people make a more informed choice about how they use the products and understand the dangers of using the products as well.
Is shisha usage also linked to mouth, oral cancers and lung cancers as well, or is there still research, you know?
Yeah, that's emerging at the moment. There's again, the evidence base on that is fairly limited, so we're just still waiting for evidence to come through.
Trends. Okay. Do products, I think actually you have covered this, that products such as pan also contain tobacco, don't they?
Yes, absolutely, and that's why, again, in terms of oral cancers, you know, the risk is higher if you use these products on a regular basis. But it's difficult to understand, and that's why we're hoping to engage better with our local people to understand actually how often these are used, and you know what support they would need to help overcome their overcome their habits.
Okay. So stop smoking services, primarily, you've mentioned earlier, Joe, that support people who primarily use tobacco in terms of cigarette, smoking. What support is available for people who might use one of these smokeless tobacco products we've talked about just now? And, what support is available for those people who are ready to quit?
Yeah, at the moment we're not discouraging anybody at all to access the stop smoking services, but we are very mindful that actually the intervention may need to be tailored differently to accommodate the needs of people using smokeless tobacco. So at the moment the first point of call would be the stop smoking services.
So it's still the same point of call,
but what may happen at that stage is obviously once the advisors understand what tobacco is used and how it's used, may slightly change the way the intervention is delivered. Nicotine replacement therapy may not necessarily be appropriate. So again, it's just understanding at the moment. There's recently been some guidance come out nationally, and again we're interpreting that locally to see how we can accommodate the needs of smokeless tobacco within our local services.
So there is still support available, needless of what type of tobacco product you might use, as in you might know if in your family that your kids actually sometimes partake smoking products. So it's useful to know that actually there is support available for any kind of smoking consumption that might be taken up by youngsters or grown-ups alike, really. So we've talked about shisha briefly as well. We've seen a growing trend, you mentioned, in terms of shisha bars opening nationally as well. So how is this being addressed locally?
We're working very closely with local planning departments within the local authority, Revenue and Customs, the police. Because obviously at the moment we tend to look at things individually, understandably, because we all have a different job and a different role to play. But what we're trying to do is link those up better to ensure that we have a more comprehensive approach moving forward. Just so everybody is aware, really, of the implications of, allowing shisha within the community. Have we addressed the right things? Have we spoken to the right people? Are the community aware of it? So we're working very closely with a lot of agencies at the moment.
So it's all about multi-partnership working.
Absolutely,
really, isn't it?
Yes.
Working in collaboration with each other, and all the authorities together can make a difference, I guess, isn't it? If each plays their role, and then together you're a very effective service, then, isn't it?
Yeah.
We earlier talked about, Joe, the diseases that tobacco has impact on. So when somebody comes through the door for stop smoking service, for example, or if they're diagnosed at some point with lung cancer or oral cancer, and it's actually traced down to that it's actually a result of somebody smoking over a long period of time, is there anything at that point that's then undertaken to educate the family about the dangers of smoking, or how just to kind of prevent that pattern developing in the family where another member might then continue smoking? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we try and train as many frontline staff as possible. So whenever somebody reaches a service within the NHS, what we're trying to ensure at the moment is that member of staff knows exactly where to signpost people for support, or can offer brief advice in terms of the implications it may have for family members, or the implications it may have for them as an individual if they continue. So at the moment we're rolling that sort of training out for all members of staff within the NHS, well, as many as we can, and the local authority, those that primarily have a link to health related areas, or links into families, who basically we can give a consistent message to, and we consistently reinforce those messages to ensure that the people are allowed to make an informed decision about their...
So how if there is a cancer diagnosed, for example, in a family, for example, breast cancer, so other members of the family, female members especially, might be offered an early screening. So is there something similar in terms of, if somebody is diagnosed with lung cancer, for example, and other members of the family are known that they smoke as well? What intervention is then put in place in terms of, is there any early detection or early screening for similar kind of disease, or is it,
Yeah.
unless they have symptoms, there is no pickup?
Unfortunately, yeah, unless a family member starts to present, you can imagine,
with
obviously,
symptoms,
smoking-related disease is very extensive, and it presents in very different ways. If you're
Sure.
looking at oral cancer, for example, and you look at lung cancer, they're very different conditions. Yeah,
sure.
so unless they start to present
With some symptoms related to that disease.
The only other thing, obviously, is if, for example, a member of your family was seeking support from the Stop Smoking services, if you had a non-smoker within the family who was supporting that individual, you could, for example, ask the Stop Smoking services if your family member could have a carbon monoxide check.
Right, okay.
And the levels within the non-smoker would then perhaps highlight to the smoker the dangers they're putting their family members
Definitely.
under. It's very difficult, like I said, unless you're able to really illustrate it in some way.
Okay.
It's difficult. But again, and again, in terms of disease management, unless they're presenting with certain symptoms,
That's right. Okay.
Obviously they're not going to receive the right screening process
Unless
to identify
what I guess
that.
the issues are, for that person. Okay, thank you very much, Jo, for coming here and talking to us today about smoking and smoking-related issues and the dangers of smoking. If you have any questions about the topics we've covered today, you can contact us still after the show as well. Or if you want to ask specifically any questions related to quitting smoking, for example, or any further help or awareness, health education or health information that you might need in relation to smoking, you can call us after the show as well. My number is 07969630399. Thank you for joining us, NHS Health Show. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa.